Welcome. You're listening to Literacy Now, the official podcast for the nonprofit organization Parents for Reading Justice, and I am your host, Brett Tingley. Literacy Now's Episode 5 is a special broadcast of a few extended conversations we had with our colleague and good friend, Kareem Weaver. We split those conversations into 3 sections, Part 1, 2, and 3. Kareem Weaver is a co-founder and executive director of FULCRUM, which partners with stakeholders to improve reading results for students. He is the Oakland, California NAACP's second vice president and chair of its education committee. His advocacy is featured in the Jenny McKenzie film, The Right to Read. Kareem also appears in our masterclass, which we encourage you to check out. Welcome to Episode 5, Part 1 with Kareem Weaver. Kareem, it's great to see you this afternoon.
It's good to be with you.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your background as an educator?
Sure. I am, I love teaching. This was my calling, my passion. I love, and I started off in South Carolina. I was at Epworth Children's Home, which is an orphanage, and as an administrator there. I was also a teacher, and I was also an administrator at a juvenile justice facility in South Carolina as part of my fellowship, my assistantship for my master's in clinical community psychology. So that's where I did my assistantship. And that really got me going into realizing something's not quite right. Something's not quite what it needs to be. But anyway, I went from there. I came to Oakland and taught elementary school for a long time, bilingual, split classrooms, et cetera. Did that for quite a while. Loved every second of it. It was hard, but I loved it. In East Oakland specifically. And then I became an administrator. I was an assistant principal and the principal, then did some other stuff. And then I trained principals. I was the ED of this program called New Leaders. Used to be New Leaders for New Schools, and trained deans, grade level chairs, assistant principals, et cetera, on how to actually transform schools that were struggling. So that's been my journey, mostly in urban settings, sheltered English immersion and bilingual. And it's been quite a while, more than a couple of decades at this point. It's been a minute. So I've been grateful for my journey.
Tell me real quick, you mentioned your master's degree was in clinical community psychology?
Yeah, it's in Columbia, South Carolina.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, I didn't think I was going to be a shrink. That's what I was going to do. And then I would get to education after I did that. But I always wanted to be an educator. And it just so happened that while I was in South Carolina, I had a health episode. And I passed out while I was singing in a church choir. And I realized that time isn't guaranteed to anyone. So I better do, what I feel like I'm here to do. So that's when I really went into education full bore. But clinical community psychology, I didn't think it was going to be useful. I was like, I just wasted my, some years because now I'm going to education. But I think actually, I'll probably use that more than almost anything I learned in my credential program for education. That's a whole nother conversation. But how we think and how what communities need to do to heal trauma, and different practices and just different things that go on inside neighborhoods and communities, and cultures and mindsets. So that was one of our many foci over at Columbia. It was a great program. Dr. Ron Prince was my advisor, great guy. But I learned a lot. And really, when we're talking about reading, there is an issue in terms of how we think collectively about it. How our education community or our parent community, what is the psychology of change? Or what allows us to keep doing things that don't work? What what I've always been fascinated by that. You know, as a kid, I used to look at, you know, slavery, like history books and stuff, and wondering what in the world were those people thinking? Or when you think about Nazi Germany and the stuff that was going on, what were those people thinking? Like, how didn't you see what? And it has to do with how communities tend to think. Groupthink is very, very powerful. It's hard to break away. Even in the most crazy situations, there is a psychological component to it. So I really was interested in that because there are some dynamics, not just in the Black community that I'm most familiar with, but in other communities as well, that we had to really wrestle with internally so that we don't just become like, you know, sheep herded in a particular direction. And it does matter to education too, because there's some things that we have to be careful about groupthink as well.
Well, and I want to delve into that later if you'd like, because I couldn't agree more. Both of our work in education, I think your experience in your education is invaluable, and you're a voice at this time that is really needed. And I think that education has come in handy. I think it serves you very well.
I agree.
There are lots of important things in education. Why do you think there's such a focus on reading?
First of all, I don't think the focus is on it enough. I don't think we as a society are focused on reading. I think we're distracted all the time and by everything. Everything from theories. Right now, the big debate is critical race theory. I'm like, the kids can't even read the theory. Why are we talking about that right now? Yeah. But there's lots of things in education that need addressing. For me, I'm focused on education because I think it's the root cause of a lot of our challenges at the community level, at the district and school level, and at the family level, and at the individual person level. And even at the state level, and you know, economics have a lot to do with it as well. So we did a five-prong root cause analysis, and we realized that, you know, if you keep peeling the onion back, you know, well, why are the kids getting suspended? Well, why were they disruptive? Well, why this? Well, why this? Why? And consistently, we kept coming back to they can't read. And when you can't read, everything else is on the table. Your reactions, your social emotional health, your future prospects, your college opportunities, whatever. And so we just got tired of plugging holes and putting Band-Aids on things. And with that being said, you know, if you're gonna focus on reading, so then we had to say, well, how do we deal with it? And we decided to really break down and figure out what are all the different components that have to be in place so that we can have effective reading programs across the country and get kids reading.
And really then that reading is the root cause
right.
of so much.
That's right. And we, you know, that's easy to say. And in education, there's a lot of talking points and buzzwords and everything. But I was blessed when I was a young person growing up in church. We used to have a church ministry. So we used to go sing in choir and go to jails and sing. And then, you know, my graduate school, I worked in a juvenile prison. And I have relatives who unfortunately have been incarcerated. And to me, it's not a theory. I'm not playing games. We start talking about the school to prison pipeline like it's another one of these buzzwords. It's not a buzzword. I talked with my nephew who got out of prison a little while ago. He's like, Uncle, they can't read. You know, I remember one of my cousins, I was about 14 and 14, I'm feeling myself. I'm and he had just gotten out of prison. And we had a conversation about what the experience was like. And he did not glamorize it. He told me how he should smear feces on himself to keep off of him at night. And he told me how it was hell let loose. And he said what saved his behind, literally and figuratively, was the fact that he could read. And so he would read people's letters for them. Because in prison, he said, barely nobody can read, really. And so when somebody's daughter or son or mother, whatever, would write him a letter, they would bring him over. Hey, man, and so he became useful in that sense. So he was like, man, if you don't listen to me at all, listen to me on two things. One, you don't got no business being in prison. And two, no matter what you do, you better be able to read. That stuck with me. That stuck with me. So that's one of the reasons why I really just focus on reading, because if you break down the root causes, it's right there at the bottom.
What are your biggest takeaways so far?
My biggest takeaway so far is that, one, it's doable. America's reading crisis is solvable. The research is there, the knowledge is there, the professional development is there. The information is there. Our culture is in the way. Mm-hmm. Everything from our political culture, we always want to blame each other. Oh, this is liberal and conservative and this and that and all that. Everything gets seen through that lens. Well, people say, well, is this a conservative thing? Is this a liberal thing? I'm like, dude, this is a human thing. You all got to be able to read. So there's that. Then there's the fact that when I say the research is there, I mean the consensus. There you find things in different, but the overwhelming consensus, if you look at John Hattie's work, is that there are certain things that must be in place that have a high impact on reading or on student learning. Then you see things like the Department of Justice 20 years ago put out their report on literacy and how to reduce recidivism. Then on top of that, you see the government put out the National Reading Panel, which has got holes in it, but there's this consistent theme where these are some things that you can do. American Federation of Teachers has 20 years ago said this. These are the elements of an effective reading program. Everybody's saying the same thing. And I can't name on two hands the number of districts that do those things. They can't. My first takeaway is, one, you have to be willing to lose friends and not be popular and tell the truth. The truth is, we're not doing what the research says to do. You can take it or let it alone. That's just what that is. And you know, I had my time in the classroom and I love it. But I'm here for purpose. And I've lost friends over this. High level, state level, district level, county level. I've lost friends because I'm an irritant sometimes. If you just be quiet, everything is cool, but it's not cool. So my main takeaway is this is eminently solvable. We have to have the will to do something about it, the humility to learn and not get all stuck up about it. And, I'm the professional, therefore I know, and you can't tell me anything. Man, if we knew, look, shame on us if we knew better but weren't doing better, right? There's a reason why all these kids can't read, and it's not because teachers don't want them to do. They want them to read, but you can't give what you don't have. Educators, for the most part, have been misled towards different methodologies, different methods, different practices that we thought were rooted in research with different curricular options. And we're doing our job for the most part, we're doing what we are told to do. And so my biggest takeaways, one, is solvable if you follow the research and the research consensus and leverage the science of reading and take this season of learning, our kids can get what they need. The second thing, the biggest takeaway is that we have to, the biggest challenge we have is the human element. From our egos to our fatigue, to our disillusionment, our pain, our anger, our frustration. You try telling a teacher who just spent gazillions of dollars in some credential program that they got to go spend some more money. Or you try telling a parent who's got, 2 kids and they're working 2 jobs and the kids aren't learning and they're going to these special classes and all this type of stuff. You try telling them to wait. The anger, the frustration on all sides, it's hard for us to get out the way. And it's hard for leadership to manage the change that's necessary to get people to get where they need to go. So that's what my biggest takeaway. It's doable. I've seen it happen. If you look at places like Seaford, Delaware, or Lane, Oklahoma, or Appalachian region in Kentucky, you'll see amazing results, and they have some things in common that they're doing. So it's possible, it can be done. And you're talking about poor whites, you're talking about people with money and people without money. You're talking about colors all across the spectrum. But the biggest takeaway is it's doable, but it's something that we got to do together. It can't be seen through like a political lens and right, left, and all that type of stuff. That type of stuff gets our kids killed. It gets them ignored, shut out, and it keeps them from getting the help that they need.
We'll be right back. Full and complete reading is a universal mandate. FULCRUM is the equilibrium at which everything is in balance. People's lives, our communities, our society at large. This balance can only be achieved when all people have had access to high-quality, evidence-based literacy instruction. FULCRUM's mission is to accelerate a movement of leaders who embrace and apply evidence-based literacy practices to improve student reading outcomes. For more information, please visit fulcrumoakland.org. That's fulcrum-oakland.org. Parents for Reading Justice is a nonprofit grassroots movement dedicated to ensuring every child learns to read by engaging parents and educators in adopting the science of teaching reading. Please watch our award-winning film, Our Dyslexic Children, take our masterclass, and to ensure all our services remain free of charge, please consider making a donation today, all at parentsforreadingjustice.org.
One of my girlfriends is from Colombia, and her dad worked for the IMF. And she told me that he said, she has a dyslexic child, that he's never seen a problem that has a solution that affects so many people that we aren't doing anything about. I mean, as you say, it is fixable. We can fix this.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, what is standing in our way? What is the root cause, in your opinion?
There's a lot of causes, but the first one is we believe deeply in our culture that this is a society based on merit. Okay, and that my position, my standing, my job, my role, my credibility, everything is based on what I have earned and the merit. And to a large extent, that's true. People can improve their lot in life. But what does it mean when 65%, what are the implications when 2/3 of the population across all ethnic groups are systematically weeded out? And that I benefit from the way that they were weeded out. What does it mean for me and my deservability? What does it mean for me and my position, right? Learner's bias is the biggest block that we have. I know people want to say racism. I get that. There's something to be said there, and classism, yes, but learner's bias. In other words, the way I learned it worked for me. And so the most loving thing I could do is share that with somebody else. So it's coming from a place of love oftentimes, and other times it's coming from a place of exclusivity. But this is how I learned it, so I know this is what works. When in reality, that does not work for the majority of kids. But the people who it worked for are now the people who run the systems. They wouldn't be there if it didn't work for them. So how are they able to even see and come up with solutions for something that's completely foreign to them? If our superintendents, state and local, were dyslexic, if our mayors were dyslexic or their children, and they had to go through this, I guarantee you things would be complete. If our chief academic officers were dyslexic and our university professors had been dyslexic, how would they teach reading? Would we still be guessing words? No, because they would know, oh, there's no way we're going to do this. But instead, not only do they do the things and promote the things that work for them, but they don't have the filter. They don't have the experience to know BS when they see it. Because it takes a level of granularity to know the crap that comes from publishers and universities and everybody's got a brochure and they slap science on the reading on there. How are you going to know? Well, if you went through it, you know that's crap because they have you doing this, 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 and this. The questions you ask are different. Your tolerance for certain things, it's different. The way you teach your methods class is different. So I would say the biggest challenge we have is our bias, our collective bias as a society that tends to replicate the success that some individuals have had. Now, there are other challenges. This is I know there's a racial component to it. We often fixate on that, and there's some of that, absolutely. But the economic piece, if your kid's not reading, the amount of money you have to spend on tutors, I don't care what color you are, it's green. Mm-hmm. This is green. You're gonna have to come out the pocket. And the assumption is that, well, they have money, so it's okay. Just because people have money doesn't mean they intended to use it for that. Most people are living, that's a challenge across the board. I don't care whether it's Palo Alto or Beverly Hills or in Appalachia. People are wrestling with the economic implications of this, and it's a challenge. And if you don't have the resources, what do? How can you get the help that your children so desperately need? How can you get, it got to a point where, my own child is dyslexic, my youngest. And I remember one day in the car by myself, just thinking, what am I gonna do? And I said, you know what? I don't have a lot of money, but what if I did have a lot of money, what would I do? You gotta start, this is America, you gotta start acting like you, think like you have, what would you do? I would say, man, I probably would get a tutor. I probably would pay for private testing. I said, well, then I'm talking to myself. Why aren't you doing that then? You keep thumping your head against the wall, trying to get the schools to do this and that. Man, you're gonna have to just get another job. Pass the hat around the family, get her tested, get the tutor. And it's been transformative for her. And I had to realize that, I had to get out of that deficit mindset of saying I don't have, I can't do, and whatever. And some things they're worth going to the mat for. And if you can't afford it, I don't know. If there's one thing that's worth going out on a limb for, it's stuff like that. So those are the types of things that I would say.
Well, yeah, go to the mat for your kids, absolutely. And we try to tell parents, get your kid taken care of first.
Yeah.
Because you can't help others until you kind of have your family settled. And what I appreciate so much is that you continue to fight for everyone's children, for all the babies to learn to read. And that's what we do.
So Brett, let me just tell you, I'm gonna try to say this with a straight face. That is my biggest regret and lament. My youngest daughter didn't find out she was dyslexic until the summer before 11th grade, or actually 11th grade. And I taught her to read early. I sat her down, I did all the stuff. And then I got busy working and doing stuff. I have a tremendous amount of guilt for two things in life, just two things. One, my first daughter, I was so busy teaching that my ex-wife was like, I'm out. And she told me, you were married to those kids, not me. So and she's right, kids sleeping over the house, I'm doing all this extra stuff because I loved it. I felt like that's what I was called to do. And she was like, come on now. Hindsight is 20/20. And on the flip side of that, and that's why I pushed so hard for districts to find things that are usable that teachers can actually do. You shouldn't have to get divorced to do this job right. as an educator.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not what and the second thing is, with my youngest daughter, I'm worried about everybody else's kid. And meanwhile, my daughter's over here traumatized, if she can read, but it was a grind for her. And I felt like she barely hung on, barely hung on. And I mean, you know, I have a lot of guilt about that. I'm grateful to both of my daughters. My son is in the middle. He's fine. He's doing his thing. He's fine. But my daughter, you know, it came at a cost for both of them. There's no way my daughter should have waited till 11th grade to get tested. What was I doing? I'm believing the schools, everything they're telling me and all of this, and I know better, but I was so busy that I accepted what they said sometimes when I know I should have pushed back, or I was so agitated that I couldn't even sit down and talk with them because it was crazy. I have a lot of guilt about that. It shouldn't have taken this long, you know. But so to other parents, I would just say, trust your instincts, and you know, and to the teachers as well. I understand your challenge and how hard you have to work, but we got to work harder, work smarter, not harder. That's why we got to get the training we need so we can support these kids. And it doesn't take, you know, you getting divorced to figure out how to support, you know, 25 babies in the classroom. Get the training you need so you can actually teach them, you know. So yeah, that's what I would say on those things.
Well, and I think that you bring up, I was talking to a woman the other day. There is a huge amount of trauma on the student, but there is also trauma on the family that goes undiscussed. We've got to get this right for all the kids, all the families, all the siblings. There's a lot of healing to do.
So Brett, let me just tell you, at the NAACP in Oakland, we have our education meetings. When we first came out with this literacy as a priority under the leadership of Cynthia Adams, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. 150 people or whatever it was, 100 people or more. And we start talking about dyslexia and talking about literacy and reading and all this. And it was like one big group therapy session, because people, not just, you know, something, I have dyslexia, and my daughter and my son is this and that, and my brother's locked up and he can't read, and all this stuff going on. The trauma in that room around literacy. So when I hear people, in education, I hear a lot of people talking about trauma-informed practices, and we have to make sure that we, you know, mindfulness and all these wonderful things. And what is the other one? Like restorative justice and things. Wonderful. All that's great. And I'm like, y'all just don't get it. In the real world, outside of the walls of that school, families and communities are traumatized because they can't read.
Yes.
70% of the homeless, illiterate. 80% of those incarcerated, illiterate. 48% with dyslexia. And you want to sit around and give me a book to try to make me feel good about myself? Man, teach me how to read. Stop playing. I hate to get, I'm just telling you. And so when you see the reality, I mean, I remember that meeting at the NAACP, tears, people crying up. And what I realize is, and this is my, with the clinical community psychology background, it's like, as a community, we have to be able to heal and forgive ourselves. We have to be able to say, let's just move forward. Let's figure out what the kids need, how to fix these systems, how to make sure that teachers can get the professional development they need. The universities doing what they want to do. And as a parent, I'm sorry if I thought that you were just being lazy. I'm sorry if I thought you wasn't trying. I didn't know you had a neurological difference that the school system had no idea or didn't want to deal with. I'm sorry. The teachers are telling me one thing, I'm getting letters home. I have a nephew who got out I interviewed him. He was incarcerated, he got out, and he said, Uncle, only time people were really focused on me is when I got in trouble. We have to forgive ourselves for that and stop it. We got to stop that because that's the biggest trauma right there. It's not because everybody in the neighborhood is getting shot up. I grew up in South Richmond, Iron Triangle, you know, during the crack epidemic. It wasn't a bed of roses. I loved hometown, but it was rough. When you grow up in a situation like that, I don't want to say you get used to it, but it's the air you breathe. It's like humidity, you know. Man, that reading, when you can't read, it's your whole world. Or when not just when you can't read, but when reading saps everything out of you that you got. I got a kid that can read, but it's a grind for her. So you give her a assignment, and it's a long assignment and everything, and man, she's drained after it. So we have to be able to forgive ourselves and move forward, because we can't waste time crying over spilled milk. We just can't.
Yeah, in business, that's called a sunk cost. It's done. You cut it, you let it go, and you move on from there.
Yeah, and here's the opportunity cost for your business parlance. The opportunity cost is that you could be doing something different instead of, what else could you be doing with that time, energy, and resources that you're wasting, lamenting and pointing fingers and all the rest of it. You don't have time for that. Your opportunity cost is too high. The kids need to learn this stuff, and they need to learn it now. They need to learn it yesterday. So.
Yes. Okay, so that sounds like a good lead into all the work you're doing with FULCRUM and NAACP. So what are you guys up to?
So FULCRUM is a nonprofit I started a couple years ago with my partner, Liza Finkelstein. And it stands for Full and Complete Reading as Universal Mandate. And we focus, our goal is, our objective is to ensure that we're getting the greatest number of kids reading possible, period. Very simple. And we're working with individual districts to help them align their programs, their structures, their systems to make that happen. We have a five-pronged strategy. Parent education, we work with parents, do workshops and things. The media campaign, helping with awareness. We deal with teachers, we support them going to trainings and fresh development, we sponsor them. We work with universities. We help them with their classes, come in and speak, and et cetera, and then engage with their faculty and their dean about their practices and push them on aligning it to the science of reading, and then the K-12 systems themselves. So that's a lot. We're not that big, but we may actually have to grow a little bit, and we're in the process of doing that. But it's been good. And the reason why the NAACP is important, so I'm on the education committee for Oakland and also the state of California. And the NAACP is a big dog, and this is a civil rights issue, really. It's a human rights issue, but it definitely is a civil rights issue, because you can't do nothing without the ability to read. And so the NAACP in Oakland has made this a priority. And the state of California, under the new leadership of LaWanda Wesley, hopefully we're making this a priority as well. She's got a background in early education, which is fantastic. But at the state level, like California we're no different than anybody else. We're struggling getting our kids to read. And so FULCRUM is working with districts, working with schools, working with parents, trying to make improvements there. And the NAACP is coming at it from a civil rights standpoint. From a legal standpoint, we've got a petition before the Oakland Unified School District. We're working with other districts as well. And you may have heard there's some lawsuits that have occurred across the state, in Berkeley and LA and otherwise, when kids who aren't getting what they need by federal law with the special ed laws, IDEA, but they're not getting what they need, that law's got teeth. And so, and that's one of the reasons, and this is very important for me with FULCRUM and with the NAACP. There's a reason why I put those two groups together sometimes to work together. The dyslexic community and the civil rights community, they got to work together. And part of that is cultural, part of that is racial. Okay, you have this, when people think dyslexia, they think white, although it doesn't discriminate based on color.
No.
But let me tell you something, when Black kids have dyslexia, usually they're not screened. Same with Latino kids or second language learners, they're not screened because they say, oh, they're not just that smart, or they're learning another language. They had dyslexia, we just not screening for them to find out. Okay, so but those who have gotten their children tested or screened, and they know that they have a learning difference, they understand their kids are just as set upon in many ways as kids who show up with skin like mine. You feel it, and you know that if you don't figure this out for your child, this system will chew them up and spit them out. And that level of desperation and clarity produces the best of allies. I don't care, I don't care, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. Look here, when you have to go to bat and war for your child,
Yeah.
we gonna get along, because I understand just like you do. There's a federal judge. Her name is what is sister's name? Friedrich. I think it's Dabney Friedrich. She's on the federal bench. She was the one who she sometimes she'll say something and say, "Oh my gosh, she's a partisan this way," and then she does something the other time and they say, "Oh, she's a partisan that way." I don't think of her like that at all. When I think of her, she was out here at Dublin, volunteering, Dublin, California, volunteering in the prison system with dyslexic inmates, women's prison, because her child is dyslexic. And so before she was a federal judge, that's who she was. And so I don't get caught up in all the other stuff. Like you volunteer in the women's prison teaching dyslexic inmates, we gonna get along. We'll figure the rest of this out. But I know you, because you get it. I don't want to hear, I understand people want to feel like they are helpful, and the yard signs and the placards and the bumper stickers of Black Lives Matter and this and that, all that. Fine, wonderful, go ahead on. Man, teach our babies to read. If you have all the yard signs in the world, but you sit on the sidelines while kids are systematically, intellectually neutered because they can't read in a society that demands it, we're not going to get along. But if you will stand up and actually let your voice and your practice reflect the reality of the situation, I don't care what color you are, what side of the tracks you're raised, we can get down. And so that's the perspective I have, and the NAACP has, and FULCRUM has. And so we do what we can to kind of push things ahead in partnership with other groups that are willing to do so.
Well, and you and I have discussed this before, but I think it is so true, because there's kind of a myth about a white dyslexia soccer mom. And, maybe you don't want to work with that person for whatever reason, but I'm with you. I don't think you can have too many allies in this fight. And I think that, as you said, regardless of political persuasion, religion, race, color, ethnicity, anything.
Yeah.
Everyone understands how important it is if your child can't read. And so that has the potential to bring us together in a time that we are very.
That's right. This may be the one thing that actually we can agree on. America, we so torn up, we don't agree on much. Depending on what station you watch, what radio station you listen to, what part of the country you live in, what church you go to, what team you like. We argue about everything, but everybody wants their child to read.
Yes.
And we all know that we have public schools that we pay taxes. So my money, your money is all going to this. We know that that's a right that our kids should have. So, if we can't get along on this, I'm not sure what we can get along on. There was a lady, I did a presentation to this group in the school system in Sacramento County, out here in California. And during the Q&A, the white lady, she was in tears. And she was talking about how she was paying for private tutoring for her child and her son, and I forget what grade he was in, probably like 5th grade or something like that, but he could barely read, and she didn't have the money, and she was working 2 and 3 jobs, and she was frustrated with the school and this and that. She was just pouring her heart out, tears running down her face. And in my mind, I sat there and I was like, oh my God, this white lady knows what it's like to be Black. You may laugh, but I'm trying to tell you, because that's the same experience. And I felt for her. I get it. And I gave her what advice I could give, and gave her some references and referrals or whatever. But, a desperate parent, I don't care what color you are. And let me tell you, like I say, even if your family has money, it doesn't necessarily mean that you budgeted to spend it on that. And it doesn't mean that you're ready to deal with the psychological and emotional trauma from having a child that can't read and the guilt that comes with that. And you still have to go up to that schoolhouse you still have to advocate and sit in the meetings and have them talk crazy to you and all. You got to do the same thing. Same thing. So, hopefully it's something that we can all come together around. And so far, I've seen it actually happen. And this isn't a pro charter school, a pro public school, a pro teachers union, I'm pro kid. Okay. Because I've seen everybody fumble the ball. I mentioned the American Federation of Teachers because they stood up for kids, and that thing they put up on their website and what they say kids need, man, I'm pro the truth. That's the truth. You can take it, let it alone. And that means that in the same, if there was a charter school that did that, I would stand up for you. But from what I've seen, this is an equal opportunity failure type deal. Very few people are getting this right. I don't care if it's district, charter, religious, left, right. We all are in the same boat together. And so I'm hopeful that in that sense, we can actually move forward and have some political will and action to solve these challenges for our kids' sake.
Literacy Now is a podcast designed specifically for parents in our effort to ensure every child learns to read. Parents deserve a seat at the table, and we bring their voices to the fore. We invite you to join the Parents for Reading Justice community on all of our socials, and make sure to visit our website to watch our documentary and to take our masterclass. All of our content is free of charge because every child deserves to learn to read. This episode was brought to you by parentsforreadingjustice.org, produced by Brett Tingley and Keita Mascaro.